Thank you, everybody, and welcome to Cambridgeshire County Council's Children and Young People's Committee. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures or share on social media during the meeting. Please, though, can everyone present turn off their phones and other devices to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. We have no fire alarm tests scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I'll adjourn the meeting and we'll leave the room by the side doors and use the external fire exit to the assembly point in the car park. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting will be live streamed and a recording will be placed on the council's website. I will adjourn this meeting every 2 hours for a short comfort break. Members will note there has been a change to committee membership since the last meeting, with Councillor Maria King replacing Councillor Piers Coots. However, Councillor Coote is going to remain as a substitute on the committee. Thank you, Piers. Item 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Tamar, could you report any apologies, please?
Apologies received from Councillor Mike Atkins, Councillor Alex Bullock, substituted by Councillor Elisa Machini, Councillor Maria King, substituted by Councillor Piers Coots, Councillor Mark Goldsack, substituted by Councillor Steve Count, and Dr. Andy Stone.
Thank you, and welcome to those here today. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest this afternoon? Nope. Marvellous. In which case we move to the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of September 2024. We're being asked to approve these as an accurate record. Does everyone agree? Sorry, Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, there's just a bit of a conflict because it says Councillor Hay was present and also absent, and I think Councillor Hay believes she was absent, but they're just very slight change needs making.
We'll get that clarified before we approve those. Other than that, sorry, Councillor Daunton.
Having difficulty opening my computer. It keeps wanting to update something and then taking me back to the beginning. If we're on the minutes, there's a point towards the end of the minutes, I hope I'm remembering it correctly, about transport. And there was an action against it. And I was just wondering if there was any update on that action towards the end of the minutes.
It'll be in the action log.
It's not in the action log, as I remember. If somebody can find it for me, it's about the meeting with CPCA.
Page 4. Page 4, I think.
Yeah. My computer is trying to open itself. Thank you. Yes, but 226, item 226, paragraph 226. Action required. The chair clarified that a note on the pilots would be circulated to the committee. So I wondered where we were with that.
So in the action log, it says a response to the Combined Authority transport pilots will be covered in the same briefing to the spokes in November.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed that. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Sorry, Councillor Hay.
But at the meeting, it was requested that it comes to a note be circulated to the committee, not to the spokes. And there's another one that's very similar. Action 225 says refer to action 206. And the action in 225, would be provided to members outside of the meeting. But if you go to 206, again, it mentions a briefing provided to spokes. It can't surely be both. Or it could be both, but we particularly asked for committee, and I'd hate that to go by the wayside.
No, that's fine. We will discuss it at spokes, but I will make sure a briefing note goes to the whole committee as well. Is that all right, Tamar? Thank you. We appear to have moved on to the action log. Councillor Bradnam.
I'm not on the action log, but I am on the minutes on page 2. where it was said in response to questions from individual members, officers clarified that a note updating on Waterbeach Primary School would be provided to members outside of the meeting. And I think that also has been converted into a note going to spokes. So I just wanted to ask that I, as local member, should be included in the information.
That's what
about
councillor
that.
Hay just asked for, and we will make sure that obviously you as local member would be mentioned, but we will get it sent to members, in all the members of the committee. So you'd be included twice, if you like. Anything else on minutes or action log, please? Nope. Excellent. We have no petitions or public questions this month. So if we can move to item 4. Item 4 on the agenda is a report on the Healthy Child Programme commissioning approach. This report will be introduced by Raj Lakshman, sorry, our consultant in public health. Welcome, Raj.
Thank you, Chair. And this report follows a paper that came to the. So this report follows a paper that came to the March committee where we agreed that we would go ahead with an integrated healthy child program across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And so that helped us to then move forward with what the service model would look like and what our approach to commissioning would be. So that this paper is about the next phase. And we are asking committee to approve recommendations to again go into a Section 75 partnering arrangement with Cambridgeshire Community Services NHS Trust, and the reasons will be outlined in the paper. We've outlined what the service model would look like with integrated place-based working. We want it to be a duration of 2 + 2 + 2 years, and the annual budget, which is just over 9 million, and but we've also said that we'd have a 3% finance related to performance. And this new commission would start from the 1st of April. So I don't know how much detail I need to go into, but basically this is about health visiting and school nursing for from pregnancy onwards to the age of 19 or 25 for children with SEND. And there has been national guidance. It's a national mandated service for which the public health grant is used. Almost a third of the public health grant goes towards this service. So it's a really important service. And the national guidance, they have looked at modernizing the program, and we followed the national guidance, commissioning guidance. And our local vision is to improve health outcomes and reduce inequalities by providing high quality, safe and accessible services. The national guidance has the high impact areas for the early years, which is the health visiting and the school aged service as well. And we've got a local children and young people's outcomes framework, which we've been developing through our partnerships, the Best Start in Life partnership, which is now Family Hubs, and the School Aged Health Improvement Partnership. And as you can see, there's domains relating to children leading healthy lives. So about lots that the health service can do, of course, in partnership. Children are safe from harm, which is more of the social care safeguarding targeted support work. And children and people are confident, resilient, and thrive in their learning and are prepared for adulthood. That's more about education. So we do recognize that almost every child needs to have that holistic view of their needs. And this supports the delivery of the Joint Health and Wellbeing Integrated Care Strategy, which is again a statutory responsibility, and the Cambridgeshire County Council's ambitions, particularly Ambition 7, about children have opportunities to thrive. So I've put all the details about the integrated model and how it would work, and a particular reference to how it's similar to working together. It's supported by working together to safeguard children. And it's delivered at the community universal targeted and specialist end, which is also how the services, health services are working now. And there is a explicit need for, in 3.4.3, early identification and facilitating of wider support for children with SEND through collaborative place-based working. And it would be, the universal offer would be about how creating inclusive places and inclusive schools would be covered in that. And obviously the other vulnerable groups are children in care and care leavers. I've outlined what are the different commissioning options available, from whether we carry on with Section 75 partnering agreements. We've looked at whether it should be a single Section 75 or separate for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We've suggested separate Section 75s, although both will talk about the need for an integrated service. Again, the pros and cons of those are listed. We talked about competitive process under PSR and in-house and the reasons why we've discounted any of those. So we are suggesting we carry on again with the Section 75 partnering arrangement with our local NHS trust, which is Cambridgeshire Community Services, and the recommending CCSR because they're a leading regional provider of Healthy Child Programme. They've got the infrastructure. They provide the mental health support teams in schools and some of the other lower tier and a lot of the specialist services as well, community services. And I think I can take questions if that's okay. Thanks.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Machini first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am sorry, I'm only a substitute here, but I've read this report with very much interest. It won't have escaped members' attention that the scrutiny of this contract as we have it now is included in the, sorry, my computer has been a terrible pain the whole day. It won't have escaped members' notice that we've got the scrutiny of this contract as it currently is with the committee that's meeting on Thursday. So I was looking at the papers and we have got 4 overall objectives, 2 red and 1 amber. And I'm especially worried about the 2 reds because they seem to be, we've got targets of over 90%, and we should be meeting those 90% instead of 70 and 69, which is what we've got on the paper going to adults this Thursday. Are we doing anything to improve those?
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for pointing out the performance report. So again, those KPIs are process measures, they're performance measures, not outcome measures, but we have them, and we had locally set ourselves very high standards, which we realize the targets actually we should benchmark with what we're doing nationally. I think it's important to point out that these are the percentage achieved within timescales. But if we look at the overall percentage achieved, then they are what we would expect and what the target is set at. So I think what we have focused on locally is that we have to have face-to-face visits. I know a lot of other areas may not have face-to-face visits. We have counted, so 10 to 14 days is a very short window. There is a bank holiday in the middle, and to do the new birth visit within those 10 to 14 days, we'd rather have a continuity of carer. And we had during COVID agreed with the provider that they could extend to 21 days for the new birth visit, and the 6 to 8 week check. We had actually agreed that they could extend it a bit, and we are just about catching up. So if you look at the report, it does say that we are improving. We are better than or similar to the national benchmark. We had set ourselves very ambitious targets, but we've realized through the 5 years of this current Section 75 that was probably unrealistic because, as I said, it's very difficult to get a new birth visit done exactly within those 10 to 14 days if there is a bank holiday or something like that. Sometimes the health visitor gets called to a case conference or a child protection issue and needs to delay that visit by a day or two. And I think we are safeguarding children and not just focusing on getting it done within the timescales. We're focusing on getting a quality, and it has been improving. We let it slip during COVID, but we have been putting a big focus on getting it within timescales. And we would suggest that with the new Section 75, we use the national benchmark rather than something that we had set ourselves locally. And totally agreed to be seen whether it is outside the timescales. We'll still keep those stretching 95% targets and 97% for the new birth, because we do believe that all children should be seen. But some of them, unfortunately, either the parents don't want it within that time, or they want to delay it by a couple of days, and things like that do happen. So that's why they don't get seen within that timescale. But we are working very hard on bringing them back within timescales, but sometimes it has been difficult to do that.
Sorry, Chair, thank you very much. I totally accept that, in the sense that, you know, the amber target as it is, you know, a newborn visit within 14 days, I can see how you could easily slip. It's the red ones that I'm more worried about, because we're talking about 6-8 week by 8 weeks and
Yeah.
a 2.5 year review. So these look to me like single points, as opposed to, and the timescales are a bit more generous. So I was wondering whether there's anything specific we're doing about 60 and 62.
Yes, we are. We are working very closely with the provider to try and get those as well within the timescales. And as I said, at 2.5 years, sometimes it does happen that parents don't want, especially if they are a universal family have gone back to work. So we will make the new targets based on the national benchmark, because sometimes the parents so what happens is, if they're on a universal pathway, they get 2 reminders, and if they still don't want or don't reply, then we don't follow them up. But if they're on the targeted or the universal plus, which is safeguarding, or the targeted offer, then they do get seen at home. So they are prioritized if they are on a targeted or specialist offer. But at 2.5 years, sometimes parents don't want it. If we count the ones who don't want them, then again, we reach so everybody gets invited and everybody is given the offer of a check. But sometimes, because parents have gone back to work and things, they don't want it. We can provide a report on the total, depending on, at some point we did think, should we take out the ones who refuse it or do not want it? But then you don't get the full picture, because we are trying to report on the whole cohort, and we don't. I know different local authorities do things like taking some of them out of the denominator. We have been true to our total denominator population and report, and we don't take the ones who don't want it out of the denominator when we report it to OHID. This is all data we are submitting to OHID, which is the Office of Health, and that's what gets published nationally. I think we are being very true to the way it has to be reported. And we will look at the national benchmark. We are doing a lot of work. It is on our radar. It is one of the things, but I know we focus a lot on that mandated contacts and those 4 indicators, but the service is a lot wider. They spend about 40% of their time on those mandated contacts. The rest of their time is on those targeted support, for some families who need more help given through them, and some families who need that multidisciplinary working with others in the system.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Dr. Lashmi, for a very comprehensive report. I
happy that we're continuing to commission this because I think it's really important service to have. But I just wanted to clarify under the recommendation, the wording, because it refers to in recommendation B for Cambridgeshire County Council to enter into a Section 75 partnering agreement with Cambridgeshire Community Services, etc., for delivery of this. And then C is to agree the annual budget, of which 3% only shall be paid to the NHS Trust. And I just wanted to clarify, is Cambridgeshire Community Services the NHS Trust to which we plan to pay the money? All I would suggest is the wording needs to reflect that in both B and C, so we know exactly who the money's being paid to, and isn't confused. I'm not suggesting that the author is confused. I'm just suggesting it might confuse somebody looking at it later on. So I have no problems with the rest of the report and thank officers for it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good point. I will change that. It is Cambridgeshire Community Services NHS Trust that, sorry, I will make that clear.
It might be helpful to say both in both.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
That's
I can add that in when we look at the recommendations later.
Thank you.
I've got Councillor Slatter next, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a very straightforward report. I had to read several bits of it several times, but that's because a lot of it's new to me. I'm very happy with the recommendation, sort of symbolised in 4.5, and I can see that because the trust works over several wide area, we will be getting economies of scale of knowledge. And I like the idea of it being just Cambridgeshire, because I think we can make the most of the knowledge of the members of the council then, and their particular knowledge in their own divisions. I think quite a few divisions are very used to having a foot in different places, whether it's GP practices or local authorities. But obviously CCS is well practiced in knowing who to charge for what and to share knowledge. So I'm very happy with that. The work of the school nurses, it's somebody my age, it's gone through lots of different stages. Will that be on the website of the CCS to make it very clear what parents can expect will be tested in school? You can't always know what the children are talking about when they come back and say they've had such and such done, but we all need to be sure that everybody's had their eyes tested as they go along. Mine wasn't discovered until quite late. You know, these things can happen because kids mask their inabilities. So it would be useful, I think, to know that that will be quite detailed on the website because it's part of what our taxes pay for. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's another really important point. So the Cambridgeshire Community Services has their website, which has the school nursing offer and details about the school nursing offer. We'll make sure that we put it on the local offer as well, so that that links across. And I suppose it's important that in schools, it's the issue is that it's not just the school nursing offer, which is why I think some days back I brought a paper about the school-aged health improvement and prevention service, where we could bring this all together, because we have the immunization service that is delivered by Hertfordshire Community Trust because it's commissioned regionally, and that goes in separately. We have the NHS commissioning mental health support teams in schools. We have lots of different bodies commissioning different bits into schools, health services into schools. Obviously, the Integrated Care Board, the NHS commissions a lot of the specialist school nursing, physiotherapy, OT. Most of it is delivered by Cambridgeshire Community Services NHS Trust. So their website has all of these offers, the mental health support teams, everything is on the CCS offer. Only bit that isn't is the immunization. I know Public Health Commission, the National Child Measurement Program, which is NCMP, and some child weight management, which is again a different provider. That's not CCS, but I think we will make it a point to make sure that it's all linked on to the local offer as well.
On that, and that applies to academy schools, local education maintained. Great.
Yes.
That's something I can tell parents because they do ask that sort of thing. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can send the link to the CCS website with Tamar.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to pick up on the 3%. So at 4.8 of the report, so obviously the 3% is we're looking at that it's to do with key performances on the objections within the funding. I'm just curious how that 3%, and obviously this is to do with contractual procedures, how that 3%, so of the 9 million, just over 9 million, we are holding back 783,000. To me, that doesn't seem a lot. Why is this a normal thing that we would do in contracts? This is the first thing that I've ever seen that we've held back. Is it that we're worried about this, the performance within this? So that's my thinking because we're doing this. And also, will it be paid, that amount that we're holding back, will it be paid as a whole at the end of the year or in installments throughout the year when the performance and outcome targets are reached within the development plan? It just feels I need to understand why we're holding that back and how that amount, have we reached that amount?
So I think when we initially started, we did have a 3% incentive, but we used to give the way we had worded it initially was that they would get the whole amount and then we would claw it back if they didn't meet the performance targets. I think what we found during the duration of that was that sometimes their finance directors would be hesitant for them to actually spend the whole amount and they would keep it back. And there's lots of issues. I think it's a difficult one to do. I don't think we've redone it this way. It was again at the request of CLT, the corporate leadership team, to do it. I think the problem is because every time it goes to Adults and Health Committee, everybody sees those reds without seeing actually that there's a lot of narrative behind it about how the total numbers seen are high. We put that in the narrative, but because we label that as red, just as Councillor Machini has picked up, people see those red dots and they think that this service is failing, but actually it is doing very well. I wasn't worried about it, but I can understand why other people, or when people just see those, it's the problem with just rag rating things without then seeing the narrative behind it. So I'm not worried that the service isn't performing. I think in terms of how it actually happens, yes, they invoice us and they'll have to give us a lower invoice, and then we try and do it at 6 months because we try to, if they're meeting it at 6 months, I would think we haven't written all of that down because this is only after the committee approve it will we go and talk to the providers about how the provider about how we actually implement it, whether we do it every quarter and say that if you've achieved it this quarter, because I have a finance and contract monitoring meeting with them every quarter where they go through their staffing and whatever their underspends, overspends, their vacancies and all the rest of it and the performance. So we could do it at that quarterly meeting, agree that we could release the rest of it, or we could wait till the end. I haven't had any of those discussions yet till we know what the committee recommendations are. But yes, I would suggest that we do it at those quarterly contract monitoring meetings. I have monthly checkpoint meetings as well, but monthly is too difficult to, they invoice us and we do the monthly contract monitoring as well. But I think monthly will be too difficult to, because sometimes when you look at the data after a little period of time, it's caught up because of the way it's entered and all the rest of it.
Thank you. Councillor Ambrose Smith, please.
Hello. If I have this right, I'm not sure if I do. Cambridgeshire County Council, along with Peterborough, are entering into a 75 agreement with CCS. The question I have is, has Peterborough seen these recommendations and have they agreed to these recommendations?
So Peterborough, the original paper about the integrated service was approved just like it was here in March in Peterborough Cabinet. The paper about the Section 75 and this similar parallel paper was taken to Peterborough Cabinet. I think I took it 2 weeks ago. I can't remember the exact date, but we currently have a single Section 75 and Cambridgeshire is the lead commissioner, with Peterborough having delegated that authority to us in Cambridgeshire County Council to enter into the sections. So currently we have just one Section 75 with Peterborough delegating that function to Cambridgeshire. I think what we are suggesting is that we'd have two separate Section 75s. So Peterborough will have their own, just because then both local authorities have the flexibility, as Councillor said, to adjust the service specification and do more of prioritize what they need in their local area. But it gives us economies of scale, because I think in the last paper I'd mentioned that we would have a top layer management structure, and some of those specialist infant feeding, psychology, and all those specialist posts would be joined.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Yes, and Peterborough Cabinet have approved very similar recommendations. They don't have the 3% incentive. That's the only difference. It's only here that we're having the 3% incentive. I can put the link to the Peterborough Cabinet decision and paper.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton, please.
Thanks. Thank you for the paper. I'm interested in 4.4, CCS providing the emotional wellbeing service and mental health support. Just a point of information, could you explain how that overlaps or dovetails with what CPFT provides? Could you draw it slightly closer to you, the microphone?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So CPFT and CCS work very closely together. There are two NHS community providers locally. CPFT are the lead provider of the United, which is the front door for any child with mental health or autism or ADHD diagnosis is needed. They're all referred in through United, which is a single front door, and then they get they have an assessment, and now we've moved more towards single session thinking, which is a single contact, and sometimes the issues are resolved then. It's a partnership between CCS, CPFT, and two voluntary sector organizations, which is Centre 33 and Ormiston Families. Ormiston Families do the younger kids, Centre 33 do the older kids. So it's more at that specialist end. Whereas the emotional health and well-being service and mental health support teams are more at the universal and targeted end, which is where about whole school approaches, about how schools can support these children with their mental health issues, how if they have low levels of anxiety and low levels of stress and other low mood, which may be transient, or maybe that is supported through the emotional health and well-being service and the mental health support teams in schools. But the mental health system is actually a partnership with CCS, CPFT, and Centre 33 and Ormiston Families, because the voluntary sector does a lot of the work as well. I think if we look at we from Public Health put in some money into United, which is how we get into their contract monitoring meetings as well.
So they're all sort of closely intertwined, really, basically is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think working as an integrated care system, there's more and more of this joining of local authority, NHS, and the NHS trusts all working together as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Count, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the paper. I want to return to the subject of the 3% and the performance indicators that Councillor Machini was referring to. So we spoke about a performance indicator earlier on. Thank you for picking that up, Councillor Machini. One thing that worried me about that was we're not hitting our targets, which apparently were ambitious, but once upon a time, we had somebody who believed that they were achievable, but now they're overly ambitious and we could move to a national target instead, which we can hit. Now, everybody in this room should know and be aware that Cambridgeshire is very, very poorly funded. The reason we're poorly funded is for every generation of governments, they look at the outcomes for an area and they say an area with good outcomes, such as Cambridgeshire, needs less money to deliver their outcomes than somebody like Central London or, you know, maybe in the middle of Liverpool or Merseyside. And therefore we get reduced funding because we have good outcomes. So when we start setting targets on the national average, that worries me, because actually we traditionally, I don't know, in this individual case, we traditionally across the board, we have very good outcomes. So it seems quite a blunt instrument to deal with a problem. Not a problem, but actually reducing ambition means we tick a box, we've achieved the target, instead of how do we achieve that earlier ambition. So that worries me, but I don't want to talk about that in depth, but I do want to refer to what that means for this 3%. I agree with Councillor Simone Taylor. If you're going to hold back a reward for doing something, 3% seems like a very immaterial amount. And to discover Peterborough haven't got any amount whatsoever, it's, you know, that's up to them and nothing to do with us. But it does seem to me that you can't change a behaviour of a person or organisation by withholding 3% over a 2 + 2 + 2 year period. But when I look on what that 3% will be based on, it's to be agreed as part of the Section 75 partnering agreements annual development plan. So I cannot read in the papers here today what targets there are to be achieved to actually pay off the 3% and see whether it's ordered or not. And I also know that even if I read them today, it's subject to change every single year. Now, the whole purpose of awarding the money is to achieve improvements, and I think we'd agree on that. So I'm only seeking a very simple answer here, just a yes or no will do me. Will the KPIs for the 3%, however many there are, 1, 2, 5, 10, all of them be for an improvement in the current status quo as a KPI? If there's anything that's the same or you're going to lower standards, it seems to me that we might be heading the wrong direction.
So the 3% would be linked to the national benchmark, and every year we would have to look at what the national performance is because it changes year on year. And as I said, this is not looked at by anyone else apart from our committees. I don't know if all local authorities and committees are looking, because it's not an outcome. It's just a process measure for how the health visiting service is doing. What they're looking at nationally is how we are doing in school readiness or actual outcomes, breastfeeding and obesity and all those things, which is when they're saying Cambridgeshire does very well in terms of outcomes. I think apart from us and the committees looking at this performance metric, I don't think national government is even looking at how we are doing in terms of the performance metric and deciding our budgets based on that. They're looking at the actual outcomes, which are system-wide outcomes rather than a single service. What we are talking about is just a process measure and a performance measure about whether a child was seen or not seen. And we've so far focused on the quality of that visit and that encounter, which actually this number doesn't even look at or capture. We will base it on these mandated contacts because I know there's a lot of worry in the system because we keep reporting them as red. And so we would try and look at those mandated contacts and say that 1% for the new birth visit within timescales, 1% for the 6 to 8 week check, 0.5% for the 1 year check, and 0.5% for the 2 year check would be a blunt way of doing it. But as I said, it is a very blunt instrument to measure the quality of such a big service.
Yeah, thank you for the response. And I do understand the difference between our key performance indicators and the national outcomes. So what I'm still going to drive at though, and hopefully yes or no, will the partnering arrangement where you agree how you pay the 3% be based on better outcomes than we presently have? An improvement? Will it be based on an improvement?
Yes.
Thank you. I think that's everybody who indicated to speak. We have a couple of changes to the recommendations, one of which is to change in C, the NHS Trust to Cambridgeshire Community Services, just to make it very clear. And then in recommendation D in...
Wasn't quite. I think if I think we might need to be guided by Dr. Lakshmi, but my observation was, sorry, I now can't find it, that we ought to use both the wording in both B and C. So in other words, Cambridgeshire Community Services NHS Trust. Is that right? So use that in both B and C.
Fine. And then having discussed with members, because of the financial implication of this over £9 million a year, I propose to change D so that it would read, to delegate responsibility for awarding and executing the Section 75 partnering agreement for the provision of the Healthy Child Programme starting 1st of April 2025 to the Executive Director of Adults Health and Commissioning in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee, with a committee report on progress to committee before option to extend the arrangement after each 2-year period for a total of 6 years to the 31st of March 2031. So that would mean that a report would come back to this committee before those 2-year extension periods. Firstly, is everybody happy with that slight change to D? With thanks to Councillor Hoy for bringing that to attention, in which case I shall reread all of the recommendations for us today so we know what we are voting on. So the committee are recommended to A, commission a universal 0 to 19 HCP, including health visiting and school nursing, that follows national commissioning guidance, has a focus on improving outcomes and reducing inequalities, and allows flexibility to adapt to local needs by working in place-based integrated teams with other local authorities, education, social care and community, public health and NHS services. B, for Cambridgeshire County Council to enter into a Section 75 partnering agreement with Cambridgeshire Community Services NHS Trust for the delivery of this service starting on the 1st of April 2025 for a duration of 2 years with the option to extend for 2 + 2 years, total 6 years. To agree the annual budget of £9,126,108 for 25-26, of which 3% shall only be paid to Cambridgeshire Community Services NHS Trust, subject to the achievement of performance/outcome targets agreed as part of the Section 75 Partnering Agreement's annual development plan, and the annual budget may be subject to inflationary changes in subsequent years. And D, to delegate responsibility for awarding and executing the Section 75 Partnering Agreement for the provision of the Healthy Child Programme starting 1st of April 2025 to the Executive Director of Adults Health and Commissioning in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee, with a committee report on progress to committee before the option to extend the arrangement after each 2-year period for a total of 6 years to the 31st of March 2031. Co-opted members of the committee are eligible to vote on this report. All those in favour, please. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Thank you, Tamar. Sorry, thank you, Raj. Brilliant. Item 5. So item 5 on our agenda is a report on the Music Education Hub Funding Consortium Agreement. This report is introduced today by Helen Gregg, who is the Head of Education Operations. When you're ready, thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? So I'm presenting this report today on behalf of Matthew Gunn, Head of Cambridgeshire Music, who's on leave this week. So Cambridgeshire County Council was appointed by the Arts Council of England to lead the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Music Education Hub from September 24 as part of a consortium with Peterborough City Council. The award is part of a nationwide programme to provide access to high quality music education for all children and young people. The DfE awards the funding on an area basis covering both Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and requires a single music education hub to operate across the whole area. As the new hub lead organisation for the region, the council will receive funding from the DfE to coordinate music education strategy in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough through collaborations with providers and consortium member music teams. This funding enables investment in the current academic year 24-25 of 1.2 million into music education provision across the combined area. This will be used to support the provision of music education support for schools, progression routes for children and young people, and collaborations that broaden access to music opportunities as set out in the National Plan for Music Education. It will also mean extra money to invest in new musical instruments, equipment and technology tailored to the needs of children and young people, including those with special educational needs and disabilities. The new hub will work with Peterborough and Cambridgeshire music teams to deliver high quality music education accessible to all children and young people in the area through diverse partnerships between educational, creative and community organisations within their local communities. The appointment is part of a major investment in a new generation of the nationwide network of music hubs. This investment will support the delivery of the government's National Plan for Music Education alongside the provision by schools and give children and young people the opportunity to develop their musical interests, including helping them to begin careers in the music industry. The consortium agreement, which has been drawn up by legal advisors in both local authorities, will enable the lead teams for music education to support existing provision and providers without disruption for children and young people, and identify and facilitate new opportunities and development across the county. It will enable the further development of the infrastructure that supports access to musical instrument learning, ensemble participation, projects and support for school music provision development. In terms of governance, a strategic board has been established and we are in the process of appointing an independent chair. This board will be supported by individual operations board in each local authority. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Thompson first, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to, as a board member, I just wanted to highlight to everyone in the committee that this report outlines the success of the application of the Arts Council of England for the new Music Education Hub investment funding. Securing this funding was a collaborative effort with Peterborough, as a joint approach was essential to avoid losing the grant. I'd like to extend my gratitude to Helen Gregg, Matthew Gunn, Head of Service, Jason Howard, and the entire team at Cambridge Music. Their dedication and hard work were instrumental, no pun intended, and in getting this application over the line. Due to the timing of the May elections, the announcement of the success were initially embargoed. However, since then, the team has been diligently working on how the governance of the hub can operate effectively across both Cambridgeshire and Peterborough together. To this end, we are establishing a Cambridge and Peterborough Strategic Hub Board, on which Councillor Atkins will sit on, while I sit on the Cambridgeshire Programme Board. This structure will ensure strong oversight and continued collaboration in the delivery of the music education across our region. I'd like to say that over time, I've been very impressed with what the music team have done on the ground. I've attended various functions, including open mics, and the engagement with the children is quite incredible, actually. So, and we are also working in partnership with Miller's Music for support for pianos not to be disregarded and put into waste. So all the stuff on board has been great. I just would like to request the committee's support for this report as it represents a significant achievement and an ongoing opportunity for our music education provisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, and our thanks to you and Councillor Atkins for sitting on that for us. Councillor Hoy, please.
Yeah, it's a little bit off topic, but it's regarding obviously Cambridgeshire Music. So many years ago now, we were told that we were going to look to have more sort of outreach and things in Fenland. And I just wondered if that's happened, and if not, why not? And if it has happened, why are local members unaware of it?
Thank you. So we have got a range of programmes across the county, and if it would be helpful, we can sort of summarise into a briefing for you by districts in terms of those projects, but in particular where Fenland and Fenland schools come into those projects. A couple of headlines of the projects we have got running at present: First Access, which is part of an Overture programme, Group Instrument Learning. In 23-24, it's delivered to Thomas Clarkson Academy to 400 students with a performance at the end, including instrument loans. And that provision has grown by 38% in 24-25 in Fenland. We also run, Cambridgeshire Music run a CPD workshop programme, and 34% of Fenland schools engaged in 23-24. We also, another example of a project, the Rap and Literacy Project, in partnership with the Rap School. We've got a project planned in Fenland in 25. So we've got numerous examples that we can do across each district if the committee would like a briefing to provide that information to you all.
Yeah, I'll just come back on that. So I obviously one thing I'm very disappointed about is when this was talked about, we originally, when you were looking to move out of Cambridge and the building, it was said that you'd perhaps move to Wisbech, and there was a location found and that was going to progress, and then it all went very quiet, and then suddenly we're back in Cambridge again, and we keep being told we're a priority place by the Arts Council in Fenland. And I have to say the Cambridgeshire Music offer in the moment in Fenland, I don't think is enough, given that the Arts Council have said how much of a priority they are supposed to be making, particularly music and the focus on music. I've tried to keep sort of abreast of what's going on with arts in the Fenland area, and quite keen on like organising events and often like arts projects in the Fens. So I'm sort of, the fact I don't know about it, I'm not trying to like sound arrogant, but the fact I don't know about it is surprising, because if local members, and especially local members that are actually interested in this subject matter, don't know about it, we aren't really getting our message out very well.
So as I said, I'm more than happy to provide a briefing of all the activity that's happened in Fenland last year and planned for the forthcoming year, and would welcome a further dialogue with you if that would help with the team.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Slatter next, please.
Thank you. And I would certainly support all local members being given information that they can use, because we get a lot coming into email and we read the bits that we're interested in. And I'm no doubt that Councillor Hoy would have, she would have seen it if it was out there. And so let's make sure we do make the most of the members' networks, because they are considerable. I was wanting to register that when I went to a launch of the new facilities at March Library, I was going to say this anyway, even though Councillor Hoy has mentioned Fenland, there I was struck by the importance of modern versions of music, and particularly digital music, and how useful that can be, and actually better value for money in some ways to have multiple keyboards as opposed to one violin, and that is obviously the way to go forward, and to open up careers, as you say, in music. The special soundproof box, for example, it would be great to see that duplicated in other areas, but drawn to the attention of those who are not necessarily hearing about things. So my question was, how do the communications work out with the libraries and the district council youth and community development officers? No doubt you have ways. I'd just be interested to know how you get in touch with the officers working there.
If okay, I'll need to come back with a detail on that in terms of the communications programme and also examples for you. In terms of the digitalisation, it is absolutely a key priority for Cambridgeshire Music to look at opportunities now and moving forward into the future in terms of provision.
Back on that, your mention of Cambridgeshire Music, I mean, I think we need to make the brand known. There are obviously lots of good commercial and voluntary organisations who do their bit in terms of introducing young people to music, but Cambridgeshire Music is possibly something we all need to know is ours. And then the office, the councillors also can be looking out for their posters and newsletters. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for the report. And I wanted to congratulate the officers in the work that they've done to ensure that we didn't lose this funding by arranging this setup, which this music education hub, because children are now very often our concentration is on children succeeding academically, and what one learns as somebody who learned instruments as a child is that learning that you pick up as a child. I can no longer play the oboe and I'm not very good at playing the piano anymore, but the principles of music learning and education and the appreciation of music stays with you all your life. And for many people, it can be a source of friendship and camaraderie right through their lives, across culture, across community, whether they're in school or in college or at work or singing. It's so important, and so I absolutely thoroughly support this and will be voting for it. And I wanted to thank you for the work that you've done on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Count, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the paper. Very clear, very easy to support. It's a matter of how we get money into the area. So I'm going to support that, but I'm going to deviate and go back to something that Councillor Hoy initiated, and we've heard some more comments on. There is a clear established link between early education in music and achievement as educational outcomes. It's to do with brain development and also collegiate working. It's a very strong link. When we mentioned Finland, as Councillor Hoy did, it perhaps isn't because we're totally parochial. Okay, I admit it. But there's actually strong reasons for mentioning places like Finland, and that's the poor educational outcomes that they've suffered from for years. Now, as far as I can tell, in the past, and to a certain extent, looking at the music, Cambridgeshire Music site, it seems to be quite a series of offers that are made available and events that are staged, and therefore you are out there for people to use your services, and I've got no problem with that whatsoever. However, in terms of our senior leadership team, it seems to me at the County Council that we should be doing more with you to actually achieve outcomes that we want, that we require. And there should be a certain amount of what areas of high deprivation that have poor educational outcomes are there, and how can we liaise more with the Cambridgeshire Music Hub to actually try and actually target those areas to end up with an outcome in 5, 10, 15 years time. And it's that element that I hope perhaps you'll take away, and perhaps the chair will take away to the senior leadership and say, how do we use this in a different way? And it's not just Finland, there are pockets of deprivation and poor educational outcome everywhere. So how do we use Cambridgeshire Music Hub to deliberately target educational, to deliberately target music education, because we know the byproduct of that will be improvement in education later on. By the way, sorry I couldn't match the oboe and the piano. I was a little bit eclectic in my choices. It was the piano accordion. I won some festivals on that, and there was a school French horn, neither of which I believe I could manage anything with these days, but rather eclectic choice.
Thank you, and I'm sure Matthew would love to collaborate more with us, and has I know sent emails out to the committee about what the music education offer is, but I'm sure we can do that further. I'm not going to get into this competitive music thing. Having been thrown out of Recorder Club age 7, my musical career ended quite early. I have Councillor Daunton left, I think, and then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you.
Go on, what can you say?
Well, I could join in, but I'm not going to. Well, first of all, it's absolutely great to see this paper. I'm just going to put in a little plug for the Library Presents, which is also Arts Council England funded and works in Finland, and puts on music as well. So I wonder if there's possibly any synergies there between the Music Hub and the Library Presents programme, which goes through the county libraries, obviously. So that's just a thought for you. But my question, or really rather observation, is on 2.3, and I'm particularly pleased to see that the Hub is supporting workforce development and providing CPD and new opportunities in careers within music education. I think that's so important for the future. And I just wonder if this new arrangement will be able to enhance that.
Absolutely, it's a key focus for us, and more than happy again to once we've sort of got the board fully established and working through the programme, more than happy to include that in a future briefing if that would help in terms of how that links into the CPD and what work we'll be focusing on.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's not actually a question to the presenters, but I want to pick up what Councillor Count said. I sat on the music board for, I think it was around 5 years. And my question was always, why aren't schools using you more? And unfortunately, and as we'll see within the report, schools have that deficit. And just cannot afford, unfortunately, to take on this type of provision, which is, and as we've heard, is a real shame because, as we know, anything creative is still part of a child's life, and sport, art, music, it shouldn't be second best to something academic. And we will see in the report the deficit within our schools, and unfortunately, music and art and creative seems to take second best.
Thank you. I think that's everybody who indicated to speak. In which case we move to the vote. Co-opted members of the committee are eligible to vote on this item, and we're being asked to approve the committees to enable Cambridgeshire County Council to access and distribute the funding awarded by the Department of Education via the Arts Council of England. All those in favour, please. I think that's unanimous again. Thank you. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you very much.
In which case, we have a slight shuffle on our agenda and we're moving to item 7. Item 7 is the Finance Monitoring Report for August 2024. Usually Martin Wade, our Strategic Finance Manager, would be with us. He's unable to be here today, and we wish him well. But we do have Stephen, who is Head of Finance, joining us today. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, committee. This report before you presents the management accounts for the Children, Education and Families Directorate at period 5, or the end of August 2024. The Directorate overall is forecasting a revenue overspend at this point of £7.3 million, or 5%, driven by two main causes. Firstly, throughout the year, we've seen the cost of placements for children in care increase above the level budgeted for. Increasingly complex needs of some children alongside a very constrained supplier market for placements has seen prices increase across the board and in all parts of the country. Secondly, we're forecasting an overspend on home to school transport services, mainly due to increasing numbers and complexity of children with special educational needs and disabilities requiring transport, and again, a limited supplier market. There's a programme of work in that place to drive down costs over the medium term. Dedicated schools grant funded budgets, particularly those with the high needs block, continue to forecast an overspending year of around £12 million, which would take the cumulative deficit on that grant to over £52 million. This committee will be aware of the drivers of that from previous updates, and work is ongoing with the Department for Education to address this issue through the Safety Valve programme, with a reset of that work due in the autumn. This remains one of the largest financial risks facing the Council over the medium term. This report also presents the savings track of the first part of the year, linking to the pressures faced, particularly in placements. Several savings intended to reduce the costs of council services aren't expected to fully deliver. Finally, this report also draws attention in Appendix 6 to the position on maintained school deficits and an update on where work is at there with each school. There are over 30 schools that we're working closely with to support deficit recovery plans over the autumn term. I should also mention, Chair, that there is currently no forecast variance on the Council's cap on the Directorate's capital programme either, the limited slippage there to date being within the level allowed for in that budget. So I'll leave the introduction there. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee comments, questions. Councillor Hoy, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to focus on the unregulated placements. Obviously, we say that our target's 2 and we're now on 14. My calculations, that means we're spending £300,000 a week just on unregulated placements, which, as we all know, is pretty unsustainable. But my bigger concern is that it's saying in the report, we've rated it black because we're saying there's just literally no way we're going to meet this, and we accept that we're never going to meet this. But what happens, because obviously there's some discussion on bans and under government banning unregulated placements. So what are our plans if and when that happens?
Yeah, the government already has outlawed placements for children under the age of 17, under the age of 18 in establishments that aren't regulated by Ofsted. But unfortunately, there is a significant supply issue across the country, not just in Cambridgeshire. We always currently have, for the last 6-7 months, had between 4 and 6 children living in an unregulated placement, and those children are children that are displaying extremely challenging behaviour. There is a national shortage in welfare secure beds. At the end of the last financial year, March 23, the number of welfare secure beds had fallen to around about 100 available for welfare secure. The overall estate is around about 220, but some of those are taken up by Ministry of Justice placements. So the welfare secure, where there's no criminal activity involved, just where a child is going to harm themselves or harm others, is down to a very small number of beds across the country, and there is an average of 50 to 60 children waiting for each of those places on any given day. In order to make sure that we look after those children safely, we must find an arrangement for them, whether there is a regulated placement or not. We can't let them sleep A, on the streets, or B, in placements where we just don't know where they are, with people that we don't know who they are. So we need to create placements along with partners that can provide a good level of care, but those arrangements are extremely expensive. We are constantly looking for regulated settings for those young people, and part of our residential strategy will be to, which came through this committee, is to address some of that need. So hopefully over the next 12 months, we'll have some resources that we can use for those children, bringing them back into our accommodation in our county in regulated settings provided by, overseen by Ofsted. But we search on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, for placements for those young people, but their care, given the complexity of their needs, their care can be extremely expensive. We're then needing between 2, 4, 5 carers at any given moment. So they're on a high ratio, 4 to 1, for example. That level of care comes at a significant cost.
Yeah, so a couple of questions, if I may. So my first one is, if we're banned from doing it, why are we doing it? That's the first question.
We have the oversight of the courts in those placements. So we have a deprivation of liberty order where we specify what the arrangements are for those children, and the court oversees that arrangement.
Saying that the doles in place can overrule the government's ban.
The doles in place means that we are able to plug the gap, if you like, while we find a registered placement. The expectation from Ofsted, and we work closely with those partners, is that where someone's looking after a child in a setting that's unregulated, and we've got examples of this right now, where they apply for registration whilst looking after the child, it would still be considered unregulated until they've achieved that. But we've got a number of examples where that's happening at the moment. So they're in a regulated setting, but the provider is applying for registration.
Back on, sorry, I'm not trying to go a point, but I sort of, this area is particularly interesting to me because obviously I work within settings within Cambridgeshire that have got no Cambridgeshire children placed in them. They're all placed from out of county, and I've always found it amazing that we aren't using our own, placements in our own area. And I worry what oversight there is. How, is it that we are almost getting the dolls in place to allow us to use the unregulated placement that's banned, and how are we going to, who's overseeing that?
No, absolutely not. The dolls in place is a necessity. We really don't want to use any unregulated placements. We want the certainty and safety of a regulated setting for all of our Cambridgeshire children. There are more children in Cambridgeshire, I think, from other local authorities than there are from our own. But the combination of young person needing a placement at a given moment, that a placement that is able to meet their needs at that given moment, often doesn't happen. The needs of these particular children are extremely complex, and not every regulated setting will be able to look after them either. So we've got to be really careful how where we place them. Often it will be very difficult for them to be placed alongside other children because of their very specific needs. So there are so many complicating factors, which means that unfortunately, due to the high demand across the country for welfare secure beds, which is what many of these children will need, or at least a high care setting where their needs can be met with extremely skilled practitioners, are very few and far between. And when you have to use an unregulated placement, oversight of the court with a dolls order in place, that becomes extremely expensive, given the high number of staff they often need to keep them safe, other staff safe, and to meet their general care requirements of the dolls. One more thing. We also oversee those. We visit those children on a more frequent basis, and we have an unregulated placement panel which looks at those placements on a weekly or fortnightly basis. We review all of their care needs. So if they've got 5-to-1 staffing, we review that each week as well to make sure that that's still required, because it's a huge cost to us. But also, it must be difficult for any young person to be in a house where they're the only young person with 5 adults looking after them. So we think normalising the care arrangements of those young people is really important. So making sure that they're getting the right care with the right number of staff is why we review them so frequently, but also because they are unregistered. We also notify Ofsted about where we place those children, so they have oversight of them in the sense that they ask us for updates. They don't oversee the provision. They do contact us and the provision and ask them to make registration, to make a registration application, which, like I said, some of them are doing, and we work with those keenly to ensure that that is progressed quickly.
I'm not trying to labour the same point, but I'm happy to take this offline, but I just think I'm very concerned about the process of us being the people that apply for the dolls and the people that find the unregulated placement and the people that work with the child, because it's a massive conflict of interest potentially. And I'm not saying that anyone would behave in that way, but I worry there's no oversight. And I know obviously in an adult setting, they have, RPRs and things that can go and visit. And in a children's setting, obviously the legislation is slightly different. And I just really worry that how are we making sure children aren't slipping through the net, and we're almost, because you could, and I'm not saying anyone is doing this, but it could theoretically be possible, because we need to find a placement. We apply for the dolls, we put the child in the unregulated placement, and then we and as the county council are then checking that unregulated placement and checking the dolls. But it wouldn't be in our interest to say we're not happy with the dolls or the unregulated placement, because then we've got nowhere else to put them. So it's just that oversight, really.
Actually, that's not correct. We move children from doll settings where we don't feel that they're getting the correct care. We do review those on a weekly basis. They get weekly visits from their social worker. They still have the oversight of an independent reviewing officer, plus the weekly panel from a service director here, which reviews their care arrangements along with partners. There is an awful lot of oversight. We don't want to use them, but we are absolutely put into a corner when we have to do it, unfortunately. The alternative would be nothing. So I don't know which one of those is better. I do really. It's the unregulated placement, because the alternative would literally be nothing.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to observe, I believe it was an earlier version of this committee where we were advised and we approved the fact that we're making available unused homes in the county to try to provide additional suitable settings for children who need this very specialised care in order to provide these settings within the county so that we have more offer, a bigger offer to them locally, and we don't have to send them either outside the county or into unregulated settings. And we approved the funding to commission a service that would provide the care in those homes. So whilst it's not easy and we're doing what we can, we have to recognise that sometimes we haven't got the capacity and we might need to use these unregulated settings. But I, for one, am reassured by what Martin Purbrick has told us about the way those settings are monitored weekly and an ongoing basis to make sure that the provision is not only sufficient, but not overbearing on the child who needs to be looked after for their own and others' safety.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stephen, for the report, and wish Martin well. And hopefully, hearing your voice, I'm not going to make it any worse for you. Got basically 2 points. One is on page 67. It mentions in respect of the targeted support on children's social care, there's an application of a one-off grant carried forward. Do we know how much that was? And if not, can we pick that up outside the meeting?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can certainly provide it with you.
Yeah, okay, thank
separately.
you. And the second point is really around transport. And on page 73 on the chart, I know you mentioned in your sort of verbal report just now, and it is obviously a lot of it's around the home to school transport. Getting a feedback there. Let's try and home to school transport special. But there's also the home to school transport mainstream as well, which is, 750,000 nearly, or 671,000 to be exact. And I'm aware, certainly from approaches I've had from within my ward about children where the bus provision initially wasn't there, because I'm bordering on Cambridgeshire and Suffolk, and there's lots of idiosyncrasies around that. Fortunately, the right decision's been made, and similarly, I'm aware of children who can't get into their local school, so they're having to be taxied to schools out close by. And through my connection with a large village, or Bodisham Village College, we're taking children from the city because there's not places. How much of that is affected? Because I know we've got an underspend and slippage on capital in terms of getting those. Is part of the answer basically that we get the capital programme up to speed as quickly as we can, so that those places are there, which would then hopefully negate the need for some of that home to school transport. Sorry, a very long-winded question. Sorry.
And as you've sort of made clear, it's quite multifaceted in a way. I think part of it is if the capital works to increase school places where there's capacity constraints will be part of it. But as I said in the introduction, part of it is also just the constrained local supply for transport services, such that prices are rising faster than budgeted for, and a bulge. I think officers might be able to confirm if I'm wrong, but a bulge in numbers of children in specific age groups in parts of the county as well, which is causing particular local bulges in costs in a way. If you look at this on an average across the county, I think it looks relatively normal, a bit overspent, but actually a lot of this is concentrated in 1 or 2 or 3 pockets of capacity constraint and number bulge in different parts.
Thank you. Councillor Hoy, please.
Yeah, it was just to come back on the home to school transport. I slightly, 2 things, without trying to over-egg the Wisbech school decision ages ago. I know it's passed, but obviously that's now a big concern because we didn't build it on Barton Road, and now all the children that live in Leverington, exactly as we said, have to go to the site that's at TCA and are then going to have a home to school transport cost. So we really, when we decide on capital projects, we really do need to think about the home to school transport. But I wanted to just slightly challenge something you said about the people can charge what they like. But I think with respect, sometimes we aren't maybe being ruthless enough. So obviously with my licensing hat on from the district point of view, I'm aware of some taxi drivers that are getting paid like £50 a mile to drive children to school. And so Fenland drivers are now being undercut by Peterborough drivers because Peterborough drivers are charging £40 a mile, and all the Fenland drivers are up in arms and saying, you know, obviously we're being undercut. And I do wonder what is the sort of lower price that people will eventually go to. There obviously is kind of some room for negotiation if other drivers have come in and charged less to get the contracts. And so I do wonder how kind of ruthless we're being in negotiating.
Yeah, you raise a really good point, Councillor Hoy, really good point about the variations in the marketplace and what that means, not just in Cambridgeshire, but with our neighbours too. I think you've really picked up on something. We have mentioned before that there's going to be an independent review of our home school transport service. That's out for procurement now. That closes on the 14th of October. We've had a number of expressions of interest. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get that work going in November. That's what we put into the specification, so that by the end of this year, we have a much clearer idea about where we fit in the national picture, where there are things that we could do to make ourselves more efficient, if there are things that we could do to make ourselves more efficient. And obviously, we'll share the outcomes here.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that would be a really good review to look at a couple of things, mostly about the wider things, because there's often areas where if people kind of pull together, we could almost put on like a minibus, because there's a lot of young people that perhaps would be prepared to share. And also about the effects of what policy decisions we're having on the wider market. So again, talking about the taxi issue, because it's much easier now for a driver to get a school contract. You know, you're getting like £500 a week and you get school hours and holidays off. Who wants to go and work on a Friday night in the town centre? Because, you know, it's a lot of stress. People are drunk, all of that. So we're then having the effect. And I can see it both from both sides, because in a way it's nice that we're giving people jobs, I suppose, that have nice working hours, but that doesn't help our local residents who then can't get a taxi when they need a taxi.
I wish the supply in the market was that busy, because we would just drive down costs all the time. That'd be better for us because it's incredibly expensive. Most of the demand increase is related to SEND transport, and those children often have a range of needs. So there'll be a spectrum of children. Some of them will be able to travel with other children. Many of them won't. And because of the journey times to their ISET provision, so they're the independent specialist education providers, wherever they are, largely this is in part this is impacted by our insufficiency in special school places. The Department of Education has committed to build 2 new free special schools, as we've heard here on a number of occasions, and those are in train. So hopefully those will reduce the need for ongoing growth as they're delivered. But well, hopefully the DfE will deliver them in time. That's the other issue.
Thank you. I think that was everybody. Oh, no, sorry. Sorry. Stephen first then, because I think he had, and then we'll come to you, Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the, first of all, a personal welcome. I've not had the opportunity to work with you before, Martin. From my point of view, you're relatively new, but from your point of view, it must have seemed like an eternity already. So if I do say anything negative, please don't take it as personal, because I realise that you are trying to deal with turning certain elements about. The first thing I'm going to have to correct you on is you just said your very last words, where you do hope that DfE will deliver those special schools on time, when we already know that one is 1 year late and one is 2 years late. So unfortunately, they're not there. They're not on the white charger coming to rescue us on some of those figures, because it's already known that they're late. I wanted to just touch on the nature of the report and the theme going there. But before I do, I have a very simple question. The high needs 14 people that Councillor Hoy referred to earlier, is that a kind of a rotating 14 people where they come in, they immediately need some kind, for some reason they arrive in the area, as we've known in the past, and they immediately need something that's very, very expensive, but you manage within a few weeks to find something a little bit more suited to their needs that's cheaper. Or have we got 14 or 12 out of the 14 that are now a solid cohort that there just isn't a fit here, that we're waiting for something more permanent?
It's an ever-changing cohort. Yeah. There are some young people that have been in there for a long time, but there's an ever-changing cohort. Since I've been here, and that's the only frame of reference I've got, so 16 months, 15, 16 months, there's been a cohort of young people whose needs go up and down. There's some young people that have been in that category for most of that time, but others have come in and gone out. So
thank you for that. And the rest of the report, I mean, what really worries me, 7.8 million pound overspent at this stage of the year is a huge amount of money that either has to come from the Children's Directorate, which it should, because it's other things are in the Children's Directorate, and that's how you have to balance your books naturally. But if it doesn't come from here, it has to come from somewhere else. There is no extra money. There'll be a book balancing for next year, but there isn't a magic money tree where things can balance. So we haven't heard anything about the plans for what you're going to do outside of trying to get some of these numbers down so they're spending less. Actually, what are you going to do about actually not delivering something somewhere else, perhaps, to make these balance? Or is it simply going to CLT? We can't manage. You're going to have to find something at the end of the year from somewhere else. Not really sure what the planning around that is. But the other point I want to make is about the nature of what I'm reading in the document. A huge amount of this overspend is supposedly due to the increase in the numbers of people with complex needs and the complexity of needs and the cost of those needs. Now, we've had at Audit and Accounts, I wasn't there, but I'm aware, and you're aware, of the paper that went to Audit and Accounts on the dedicated service grant. And to put it bluntly, it was scathing about things that were internal to the county council, about predicting, about modelling, about numbers, about saying what those numbers would be. It was about smart targets, and there was a whole range of things. So when I read one side of the story saying that we've suddenly been landed with a load of extra provision that we weren't expecting, I have to, in the back of my mind, turn around and know that we have an audit report that say part of the problem is we've been very bad at predicting. All right. Now, I appreciate that, as I say, in terms of multiple years, you're quite new here. So I understand that there's an element of I'm looking a lot at the past and what's happened and how you're going to turn it around in the future. But I cannot remember a year in the recent past where the home to school transport has been anywhere near the budget. It might just be me, but I can't remember getting it. Every year, more money has been allocated on the basis that we've overspent and it's getting more expensive, and the same reasons. And then the next year it gets broken and broken again. And so I'm wondering if a lot of this is the predictions about how much we're building in Cambridgeshire and how much is arriving in Cambridgeshire, as opposed to once it's arrived saying we simply can't afford it. Thank you.
There's a lot there, a lot there for me to pick up on. So I'm going to focus on the last thing first about the home to school transport, because that is where the freshest in my mind. What we know is that in Cambridgeshire, the number of education, health and care plans has increased since 2022 by 1,500. So that's about 800 per year, just under 800 a year for 2 years. And those young people all will need additional support either in their school, which will cost us money, or in an alternative school or education provider, which will cost us even more money. If it's not their very local school, then there'll be transport implications for us. So the EHCP is driving costs across the DSG, but also in our school transport budget. So it's that rise which really is fueling the costs across the piece. It's not just in one sector. It's not just the DSG. It has a massive impact across all of our finances in ways which are not always obviously connected. The number of children who are the number of families who are making requests for an education healthcare assessment continues to rise year on year, not just in Cambridgeshire, nationally. We now know that there are over 113 local authorities that are either in safety valve or in delivering better value because they're overspent on their high needs block, and that we are within that cohort. And this rise didn't just happen. This has been growing for years. We signed our safety valve agreement in 2021, I think, 2021. So we were already under a lot of financial pressure to be included in the safety valve in the second cohort, I think we were. So this isn't a new problem, but the demand continues to increase. We've got a statutory duty to assess those children's needs. And when we refuse to do that and we don't have good grounds, the definition for the needs for assessment is broad. And we have a responsibility and right to do that. And when we don't do that, sometimes we get challenged on that, and local authorities taken to tribunal for either the provision that they are, the provision at the outcome of the assessment or the refusal to do an assessment. We're losing 97% of the time. And that's not just Cambridgeshire, that's all local authorities. That's the tribunal picture. So it's really tricky space for local authorities across the country to try and predict the demand for those smallish number of children when you look at all of the children in Cambridgeshire. But those children's needs mean that they need to go to different places. They don't have easy routes. The sharing of transport is a great idea, and we do look at that. We do a lot of route optimization. We've got some route optimization software which helps us to plot children so that we can maximize the efficiency of our routes. But many of these young people who have specific needs will need to go on individual journeys, and that's the real cost. What we're hoping is that having someone with experience of a number of different local authorities, which is why we're doing this procurement process at the moment, will help us to look at things that we haven't considered, or whether there are other things that other people are doing that we haven't thought of, which actually are saving some money. But the root of it is the demand for special educational needs, education and transport, outside of the placements that we talked about, that Councillor Hoyle was talking about earlier. So those are the three drivers. Two of them are really clearly linked to SEND.
Thank you. I think that was everybody. Oh, no, sorry. Councillor Ambrose Smith waving at me, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Martin, it's regarding page 80, capital projects, the position of those projects. There's 6 of them in your sheet here, and the slippage reason is due to design not being completed. Do we have, and therefore a knock-on effect on costs? I just wonder, do we have a problem with design generally? How's that contracted?
No, but sometimes the design of a school will, the school will be designed, and then I'm thinking, sometimes a school will be designed, but then the cost of that original design will be hit by some significant inflationary costs, which means that that original design is almost unaffordable, and therefore we will have to go and redesign the project. So that's happened in a number of cases. So that's part of the design issue.
Then aren't we experienced in design of schools? We should be by now to know what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable, what is affordable and what isn't affordable. So can't we get that right first time?
Yeah, I agree with you. If it was down to us in every case, that would be the case. That would be easier to manage, but sometimes it's down to developer who are delivering the schools and their delivery costs. So developer will design, will procure the project, they'll design the school, they will do the design which we are happy with, and then when it comes further down the project, they will come back and say the costs have increased significantly. That's the moment that we have to consider whether we, as a local authority, for example, can find £8 million more to meet the design of that school, which was originally going to cost us 11 million. That's an example at the moment. Those numbers aren't the actual numbers, but that's how it works on some of those design problems. So we then have to say, well, we can't afford to top up that project which you originally procured for a certain amount of money, and then we have to go back and look for redesign, either redesign from the same developer or go reprocure it.
Thank you. So the term phasing, the cause of this is phasing. Is that right?
Thank you. In which case, we don't have to vote on this. We've just been asked to note this report. I think we have noted very much. Thank you again, Stephen, for joining us. Committee, we are going to go back to item 6. Item 6 is our Ofsted action plan and update on sector-led improvement programme. Committee asked for this to inform what's been going on since we've had our sector-led improvement partner on board, and also since our Ofsted inspection. And Dee Revens, our governance manager, is going to introduce this for us. Thank you, Dee.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Dee Revens. I'm the Governance Manager across Children's Education and Families. I've helped support the work with the self-evaluation and develop the action plan for Ofsted, and also led on the Essex sector-led improvement for Cambridgeshire. There's 2 aspects to this report. There's the Ofsted and the sector-led improvement. I'll start with the sector-led improvement. So our sector-led improvement is a partnership with Essex County Council, who has got an outstanding children's services. And this sector-led improvement is funded by the Department for Education. Phase 1 was from July last year to March this year, and phase 2 is ongoing from April this year onwards. So phase 1, since July, there's been 8 services. Each service has 4 or 5 geographically based teams. Each have had received a diagnostic visits from Essex. Essex diagnostic visit is to speak to many team members, case sampling and some focus groups, and they identify the areas of strengths, the areas of development, and make some recommendations for each of those visits. Midway through the diagnostics, there were common themes that emerged, and CCC just developed a Big 6 spotlight to re-establish a baseline of core working, which includes guidances, toolkits, and training provided. Those areas of strengths are identified in the report. Moving on to the Ofsted, we had our Ofsted in March this year, and we received in May our requires improvement to good judgment in all areas. There were 7 recommendations altogether, and these are outlined within the report. These include the workforce stability, our placement sufficiency, our quality and consistency in assessments, our achieving permanence and support with the special guardianship orders, our transition planning for care leavers and our out of hours, and our support for the 16 to 17 homeless. Appendix 1 is the Ofsted Action Plan, which is the response to these recommendations. This has been forwarded to Ofsted, and I'll leave it there in terms of any further questions.
Thank you, Dee. I've got Councillor Taylor first, please.
Thank you, Chair. On a lot of these actions, I noticed there is timescales, and a lot of them you have progressed really well on. So I would like to say well done on that. But I do want to pick up on 2 which haven't, alongside that, haven't got any progress, and the timescale. And the only reason I'm picking up on these 2 is that the timescale is December of this year. So it's one of them is the placement sufficiency at 2.1, and that's to do with unaccompanied asylum seeker children, and knowing that we ensuring placement availability and affordability. And the other one is homelessness 16 to 17, ensure access to advocacy, which includes 16 to 70 homeless when the assessments take place, to ensure clear, transparent and understanding and advice. So I'm just knowing that we're only got 2.5, 3 months to go, but there isn't any progress in that box. So I just want to know if there's any update on those.
Thanks. I can pick that up. Yeah, so this is we're viewing this as a dynamic document that we're updating it all the time. And in fact, underlying this is a more detailed document with tons of lines of activity on it. So all of our learning from audit, from practice reviews, and from any other learning, other things have gone well or things that haven't gone well, there's a really massive action tracker underlying this. But this is a dynamic document which we will keep updating as we go along, but it had to be put in for a certain time for the papers. But I can say that there's quite a lot of action happening for unaccompanied asylum seeking children. That's our highest that's our largest area for newly looked after children across Cambridgeshire, and they are almost all coming from the National Transfer Scheme. So we are a very active player in that, and there have been also, we've seen an increase in unaccompanied asylum seekers seeking children who are just appearing in Cambridgeshire, whether they're lorry drop or whatever. But there's been an increase in that. We had 5 in one day. So we have developed we've developed our own unaccompanied asylum seeking children's team, which will be specific, looking at their needs. And we have worked with our head of children's commissioning to make sure that when we know children are coming through the National Transfer Scheme, we've got a network of providers up and running so that we have accommodation ready for them to walk into as soon as they come to us. So that also means that we've been able to take advantage of additional money that comes if you place your children within 5 working days of notification. So we've been able to work closely with all providers to make sure that happens. But you're right, it's a gap in the progress and we could have put something in there, but a lot of work is happening. For the other comment, which was, saw this earlier. Yeah, homelessness, is that 2.1? 7.2. Thanks. Yeah, so part of that is to working with our districts to make sure that our districts, because that's where the children, young 16, 17 years old homeless will appear at our districts for housing, as they'll be presenting as homeless. So it's working with those. The reason it says better recording on local children's systems is to make sure that we are recording the information and advice that they're given. What Ofsted found was that it wasn't in every case where young people could have been made a looked after child. They would have been told that, but it wasn't always clear that we could evidence that. So that's part of the reason for making sure that the recording is there. And we are working at the moment on increasing our advocacy offer for young people that are in that predicament, so that they can access independent advice at the time that they present as homeless. So that is underway.
Thank you. And just to say, Councillor Boulat, who's the migrant champion, and I made a visit to the US team, and some really exciting work going on there, and including their work with our separated migrant children as they become 18 and become our care leavers as well. So it's a really improving piece of work that I think has been shown both to be needed, but that we're doing it in the right way. Councillor Bradnam next, please.
Thank you. Just one from me, but again, because it's got a swiftly approaching timescale, and this is 5.3 under care leavers. You'll appreciate I'm speaking as chair of the corporate parenting subcommittee, so I'm mindful of our care leavers. And this is enhanced preparation for independent support to young people from 14 years. And I just wanted to understand what we are doing to increase our preparation for young care leavers. Thank you.
So we've asked our care leavers what they would, what help and support they would have liked when they were 14, to make sure that they're prepared for when they leave care, because care leavers by experience are ones that are going to give us better information than us trying to guess what was been helpful at the time. We're working with our foster carers to support them to share that information. But we have also increased the number of personal advisors that are in our care leavers team, because we were allocating care leavers to personal advisors too late, so they were approaching their 18th birthday by the time they were getting a personal advisor. What we would have liked to see is them being allocated much earlier than that, so they can start that relationship. They would have a social worker and a personal advisor concurrently for a period of time, so they can build up the relationship with their personal advisor while still having the expertise of a social worker, which they need to have until they're 18 because they're a looked after child. The council did that. The council had already made a commitment to that before Ofsted arrived, and that was really helpful because we were able to tell them about that, and those people are now in place.
Thank you. I attended the young people's corporate parenting informal meeting, and was interested that
several of the young people there were actually 18 and, you know, approaching the point where they wouldn't be encompassed by this anymore. And both of the people who spoke to me said they did have advocates, but I sensed that it might have been helpful if they'd had an advocate earlier. So I think that's good that we're seeking to provide advocates at an earlier point so that they get used to them and they can understand and guide them and get to know the young person to understand what are their wishes. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Count, please.
Thank you, and thank you for this report. There was a lot to go through from the original Ofsted report, and we saw some of that repeated in that audit report, such as smart targets and that, etc. And I mentioned in the last subject matter about predicting and moving forward. But here we are. We've got a nice metric, not a metric, a worksheet of what we need to do, how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, etc. And in the last column, we've got the progress column, and obviously it's early days, so a lot of these are unpopulated. I understand that. However, some of these success criteria will be measurable. And when I look through the progress criteria, all we've got are positive steps, which are clearly indicated, or ways to get forward to the positive step, no negatives at all, which worries me because there's certainly fluctuations on occasion. So I looked at some of these. So if we take a success criteria on one, retention of staff continues to increase. I assume from March we had a baseline and we monitor that on a monthly, bi-monthly or quarterly basis. So therefore, there should be something in here like this was the baseline and this is where we are now. So I think that all of these should be populated where possible with something, if you see what I mean, where we started and where we are. And that way the committee can, apart from applaud you where you're making some good progress, such as the caseloads which have gone down, also add some focus and perhaps some helpful suggestions if something isn't going on track. And so I'd like to see more in the progress column if possible, particularly where there is a statistical measurement.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that comment. So the underlying action tracker has more detailed lines about what we're measuring. This report, this action plan was specifically for Ofsted. So we had to submit this for them. We didn't. They don't need to see all of the detailed workings underneath. What we wanted them to see was, this is what we think from reading your report of the priority areas of action. This is how we're going to address it. And they got back in touch with us and said, yes, they're satisfied with this report. So that's it. That's the mission it needed to accomplish, and it did so. Underneath that, like I said, is the more detailed action tracker where we have all the measures. And you're absolutely right. So things like the retention of staff, we do track that because we know what our agency percentage is. We track that every month and we follow that. And at the end of we've set ourselves tough targets for that. So we want to reduce our agency percentage down to 15% of our social workforce. So we review that all the time. We review it through our workforce development board, and we review it through our improvement board, chaired by an independent chair, Anthony Douglas. So all of those things are in various different places. You're right. The purpose of this report wasn't to have all of that detail in it, but we can always bring any detail you want. And there are other dashboards. There's the corporate parenting dashboard, which goes to the corporate parenting subcommittee. So there are other detailed data dashboards that go to other committees, and we have absolutely stacks of them, to be honest. So we track everything in great detail.
Thank you. I think I have Councillor Slatter next, or was it Councillor Daunton? I don't recall. No? Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for a very clearly laid out report. There's a huge amount of information here, and it makes it easier to absorb some of the information. My questions are on section 3 assessments, which I think is a really important area. First of all, on the MASH, progress, under the progress column, new MASH screening template in place from the end of August. So just to know whether that is in place and that it's working.
Perhaps Raoul would like to.
the simple answer is yes, but Raoul has far more detail than
Come here, let's give you something to do.
So there's been quite a lot happening in the MASH. It's been quite an overhaul, actually, just to summarize in terms of processes. One of the key things that we've been doing in the MASH is change the mindset so that we can focus on early help and prevention. And so everything that comes in from partners, the community, etc., the mindset is who is best placed to support families, that sort of team around the family from an early help prevention point of view. So we've are in a process of shaping up our processes. We have already made some changes in terms of decision makers, team managers, making that initial decision making, setting the context for MASH social workers. That's our multi-agency safeguarding hub. So that referrals can swiftly travel into the early help hub. Before that wasn't the case, and there was a bit of delay because of that, and contacts and referrals being passed within the MASH, and that obviously naturally created delay. So that's been reflected in our increment in our early help hub contacts being triaged, and that's translating in more targeted support interventions in all the districts. The team managers making that initial decision is quite important, in that sets the context for the MASH social workers that are screening in the MASH, so that decisions that need to be made immediately, for example, if a universal service is required rather than social care, that happens without delay, and to prevent clogging up the system, as it were, which was then has been leading to higher referrals and higher caseloads. So that's sort of a key progress we've been making in the MASH. Also, loads of work happening with partners in the MASH as well, working very closely with health colleagues and police, so that the quality of triaging and the MASH inquiry process more specifically is best as can be, so that because it's quite a draconian process where we do have to sometimes override consent to share information where there are child protection referrals coming through. So we're looking at all the business system side of things and information sharing processes. So there's quite a lot happening in the MASH.
I asked the question. I've got another question under section 3. It's disappeared from the screen, back now. On the same section, training on the key big 6 areas. So just if we could have a little bit more information about how the training is going, consistent training and service meetings.
Yep, we're doing a range of training. We're doing training. Essex is doing some training for us. We've had two staff all-day conferences. We're doing training sessions based around the big 6 practice priorities, so chronologies, visits, management oversight, supervision. Those are the issues that we've got specific sessions on, and they range from whole training sessions to bite-sized bits, to specific work with teams, to our principal social worker doing work with them, and also building them into our audit process as well, so that we can see whether what we're doing around those key practice areas is having an impact. And Liz's team leading on that. We've got a full quality assurance program for the year, and we're always trying to squeeze more into it. I'm sure Liz would agree.
Thank you. Councillor Hay, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just bring that a bit closer. I actually sit on the foster panel, and it concerns me that on more than one occasion, when we have reviews of existing foster parents, one of the things they do bring up is the out-of-hours support that they have. And I noticed that's one of the recommendations that the Ofsted inspector made, the responsiveness of the out-of-hours support. What I'm being told is the only support they've got is somebody at the end of a telephone line. And on more than one occasion, all they've been advised to do is call the police. So what I want to know is, what are you putting in place to make it more effective for the help that foster parents need at out of hours times?
So there are two out-of-hours services that we have got. One of them is specifically for our foster carers. So that really is an advice and guidance line. So it's not a line that's going to spring into action and go round their house when they're having a real difficult episode with one of the young people that they're caring for. So the fact that they get advice on the phone, that's really all it's designed to do. But we are aware that sometimes they feel that they need more than that. So the second emergency duty service is the emergency duty team, which is county-wide. It covers Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. It covers children and adults. And sometimes they will be advised to phone that number as well, because there are social work staff that are part of that EDT team that can come out at night and deal with child protection issues and things face to face when they're particularly serious. Sometimes it might be that calling the police is the right thing to do. No one wants to criminalise our looked after children, absolutely recognise that. But where someone's safety is involved, that might be the quickest way to make sure that people are protected and getting the help they need, especially if they've got other children in the house, for example, and someone's in a really heightened state. So calling the emergency services, whether it's an ambulance or whether it's the police, might well be the right thing to do at that time, just to make sure that everyone is safe. We are constantly working with our foster carers for feedback about how we can improve the service. And I think that we've really developed the offer for them, and we are really proud of them as a group of carers. We are seeing an increased interest in people wanting to come and foster for Cambridgeshire, which is great, because we've seen dropping numbers of foster carers. And I imagine I hope you've seen some more busy panels than you have done recently. I can see you nodding. That's really good news, because I think that we've worked hard to make sure that they understand how valuable they are to us. But there will always be cases where things are challenging out of hours, and we're looking at how we can add other things to support that, thinking about our clinical service and how they can offer outreach or advice and guidance to foster carers, so that when similar circumstances arise, they've got a bit more tools in their toolkit, if you like, about how to deal with those really challenging situations. I don't think anyone's ever got it 100% right in those places, especially if you've got someone, even if we had a come out in an emergency service, it could take an hour or two to get there. So sometimes the police is the right answer. But
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Oh, Martin.
I just wanted to say, first of all, that as you will all be aware, this was previously shared services up until the end of last year with Peterborough, and their inspection outcome was inadequate, and ours requires improvement. That's not a boastful thing. What I'm saying is that the staff that were already here, the staff that have been part of our Cambridgeshire teams for many, many years, had a good level of practice, and now we've got some. Now we've improved our quality assurance. Now we've improved and focused on our basic things like their supervision that they get, focusing on the quality of their visits. That's what Ofsted saw. And when they met our staff, our members and our leaders across the system, as well as people in schools and health colleagues, what they noted was that there's been a real change in Cambridgeshire's social care delivery. And that's why they felt confident enough in us to see that the change was good enough and our trajectory was right enough to give us that requires improvement. No one is going to be proud of requires improvement. We want to be good or outstanding. Well, we want to be outstanding, but we'd take good, and that's what we're working to for the next inspection. Then we will have multiple inspections between now and that next graded inspection. But what we want to see is a cycle of continuous improvement, and that's what we're committed to. The second thing I wanted to say was thank you to Dee, who really is behind the plan, making it look as simple and easy to follow as it is. Anthony Douglas, our independent chair, said that it was one of the best improvement and action plans that he'd seen. So we're grateful to Dee for the work that she's done, pulling all these multiple strands together and making it easy for us all to understand. Thank you, Dee.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you. And I just wanted to point out that those of us who are on the Corporate Parenting Subcommittee have received information from Ranjit Chambers, the Service Director, that the Care Leavers local offer
page has just been updated on the website. And I just, this is part of our responsibility. It was one of the things I think on the improvement requirements. And I'm very glad that we've gone as far as to get that improved. And I wanted to thank Ranjit Chambers for the work she's been doing to absolutely drive that forward. And I particularly wanted to say thank you for that big improvement.
Thank you. And I'm assuming nobody else. In which case we've been asked to note this report, which I think we have done. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Raoul. Thank you, Martin, for answering many of those. We are going to take a 10-minute break, coming back at 4:11, please. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Back to the agenda, we're on item 8. So item 8 is the Children and Young People's Corporate Performance Report. Martin, our Executive Director for Children, Education and Families, and Sarah Callahan, our Service Director for Education, along with Liz Chambers, will present this one. I don't know who's starting. Liz, I think. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Goodliffe. Sorry, Liz Clark. I'm the Service Director for Quality Assurance and Practice Improvement. And you did know
who
that.
you are, sorry.
This item, Sarah and I are going to be co-presenting and answering obviously any questions that you might have. This is in relation to, in your pack, the report, the performance report covering Q1 of 24/25. So obviously, as I'm sure many of you have seen this before, it contains 20 key performance indicators, 14 of which are related to education, 5 children's social care and children in care particularly, and a youth justice kind of one. So obviously this report, which is delivered to you quarterly, continues to support this committee with its performance management role and provides an update on the status of the selected key performance indicators, known as KPIs, to track the performance of the services for the services this committee oversees. And as we said, this report covers Q1. So I will, after that really brief introduction, if there are particular questions about any of the indicators or the narrative contained in the report, we'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Councillor Count?
Yeah, thank you. Mine's quite general. I'm not a regular member of the committee, so it's been a few months since I last came on as a sub and saw this. But I have an overarching worry for what's going on. And I'm going to give you a few examples. So on page 99, that's a RAG rating of red. Current month this is the children who are re-referred into social care within 12 months. 27%. It seems to be an increasing cohort. So it's not good. It's very worrying. The next one I want to refer to is on page 100. This is the number of children with a child protection plan every per 10,000 population. Here, the worrying thing is not just the current month is 31.4%, which is about 50% above target. It's actually, if you look at the graph line, there's a very clear trend appearing to me, depending on where you start looking at it from left to right, whether you're going back to July 20 or the more recent years. I think that is the start of a trend, a very clear and obvious trend getting worse. I've got another one on indicator number 10, which is on page 106. Pupils attending schools that are judged as good or outstanding. There's obviously a clear trend there. Again, for me, there is a question involved in that one. That's page 106, and there's a cliff edge at the end. So I'm going to assume that maybe 2 or 3 secondaries got taken out of outstanding. Perhaps you'll know which ones they are or not, but if not, an explanation on the cliff edge at the end. And the last one I want to pick up on is page 111, which is the percentage of educational healthcare plan assessments. We were talking about them being a statutory duty earlier on. We're talking about a target of 7%, or target of 70%, 70%, and our performance is in the 5% area. That's extremely scary, seeing as it is statutory duty. But again, if you look at it, you don't really see, you see a lot of variation, but we don't seem to be in more recent times on any track towards somewhere where we'd like to be. The reason I brought them in as a group, apart from the one question about the outstanding schools, is because of the earlier papers on Ofsted and the comments from the audit and committee. We need to worry now about these ones, worry incredibly hard, because if we don't turn ones like these 4 that I've mentioned around, these red ones round, which are interlinked, inextricably interlinked with our performance, and therefore the Ofsted reporting, there will be eventually a government intervention. And so whilst there will be a lot of explanations about what we're going to do, the measurements in front of us scare me, they worry me, and they're not in a good place. And that's really what I want to say. Apart from one question, that's where I wanted, what I wanted to get across. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just pick up on the a couple on the social care? And Sarah might want to comment on the education ones. On the social care ones, I think you're absolutely right to spot them. They're all there as red. But as with everything, the devil's in the details. So this links to what Raoul was saying in his summary about the MASH changes, because what we were actually doing is too many assessments. So we were assessing too many children too frequently. And at one point, 64% of the assessments that we were doing were ending in either no further action or referral to targeted support. So which is why so many of that, we've got such a high proportion of those children coming in for their second referral, getting another assessment, and that proportion of going up and up and up of why of having a second referral within 12 months of a previous referral. So the changes that we've made now means, as Raoul described, those young people will get their needs met by targeted support earlier, where they don't need to have a referral. The contact will come in, they'll go to a targeted support and get their needs met there in the majority of cases. And we know that the evidence told us that we were doing far too many. In fact, we were doing so many that when we submitted our end of year data to the Department of Education, they came back to us and said, why are you doing so many assessments? They were concerned about they asked us to contextualize what had happened. And we explained about the changes that we've made in the MASH, the changes that we've had in our leadership team, the fact that that had led to some practice instability, but the outcome of the Ofsted inspection with this, and that we would anticipate that by the end of the year, because we are not doing so many assessments, largely that we didn't need to do, first of all, that would bring all those measures down, the first one being the repeat referrals. We will see that naturally come down as we're doing less, but children are still getting their needs met. The other two on the social care side are ones where we've got incredibly high targets. So the child protection plans per 10,000 indicator 2 is we've got a target of 21.1 per 10,000 children across Cambridgeshire. The England average is 42. So we're expecting ourselves to do to have half as many as the country, as the national trend. That's really hard. What this doesn't show is and what I find really useful is where we are in the Eastern region. So where we are compared to the Eastern region, which is probably one of the highest performing regions in the country. We've got a number of outstanding local authorities and only one inadequate, and the rest are either good or requires improvement. It's a very high performing region. We're third out of 11 for the number of child protection plans, which means that most of our children, where they have a safeguarding need, are appropriately on a plan, and others get the right help at the right time to prevent them going on to that plan. Because if an agency disagrees with the decision not to proceed with child protection processes, there's an internal and external escalation process, so everyone can eventually escalate it to me, and I will look at it and make a decision. We have internal ways of people that can have their concerns heard as well. So there are checks and balances, thinking about what Councillor Hoy was saying earlier about making sure that we're not just marking our own homework all the time. Actually, there's a voice for partners to support children. And again, similar with the number of children in care. Our target is 40 per 10,000. We're at 47. The England mean is 67. So we have far fewer children in our care than the England average. So I think that what that means is that we are really good at making sure children can stay at home safely. When Ofsted looked at their number, they looked exactly at this cohort of children coming into care. They looked at the most recent 10 coming into care, and they found that amongst many, many hundreds of other cases, but that's a specific group that they look at, and they found the decision-making was sound and children come into care at the appropriate time. Sometimes It could have been planned a little better, they found. As you know, we are requires improvement. We're not good. We're not outstanding. We know there's a long way to go. So please don't read this feedback as anything me saying it's all rosy in the garden. We know there's a lot of work to do. But just wanted to contextualize those. They are red, but they're red against some specific sort of really tough targets. I'm going to let Sarah comment on the other ones. And I really see why the other ones are important.
Thank you, Martin. So I'll go to indicator 10 first, which is the one that you referred to in terms of schools judged as good or outstanding. This is in relation to our special schools, not to our other schools. So I can tell you that overall, 92.5% of our schools are rated good or better. But this is in relation to the special schools. And we have 14 special schools, and 4 of those are less than good, 2 which are academies and 2 which are maintained schools. Of the 2 that are rated less than good, that are academies, one as on an improvement journey, it was previously inadequate and now requires improvement. So the 2 other schools, Castle School was rated good in 5 out of 6 areas, but because the quality of education requires improvement, that meant overall that it was judged as requiring improvement. The other school, Granta, which a maintained school, was judged RI owing to the curriculum not being good enough. We have got a lot of support going into that school around English, PSHE, personal, social and health education, and we do believe that the plans in place are now of good quality. One of the academies that was rated as requiring improvement was Harbour. It's just moved into a new trust, Meridian, and we do believe that it's on an improving journey since that move. And then Riverside Academy actually was rated requires improvement for every judgment around leadership, the quality of education, behaviour, and that also that the safeguarding records were not sufficiently well kept. That's part of the Horizons Education Trust, and again we are working with them to secure improvement. So what I can say is that overall our schools are 92.5% good and outstanding. Going back to the other issue that you've raised with regard to the timeliness of our education, health and care plans, at the time that this report was submitted, you're right to bring this up. We were at 5%. What that means is those plans should be completed within 20 weeks from the point of referral to the final plan being issued. And at the point that this report was pulled together, it was at 5%. I can say that it's currently at 19.5%, which is still not good enough. And there's a number of reasons why that is. If you refer to the narrative within the report, one of the reasons that contributed to this was we did have a system in place that was not fit for purpose. We've now bought into a new system that we're in the process of implementing, so we couldn't rely on the data that was in that previous system. We've now bought into a new system, we're training our staff, we're making sure that that system is fit for purpose. But the fundamental reason that's driving that poor performance is lack of capacity, and that is a national issue, and it's around the number of educational psychologists that do the assessments as part of that 20-week process. So we're doing a number of things to address capacity. We've just agreed to secure some additional support, some locum EPs that will work with us to improve the timeliness. We're also doing a SEND end-to-end review. So what we mean by that is we're looking at the activity across that 20-week period, and we're looking at where the pressure points are so that we can make sure that we put the resources in the places where that pressure is most impactful. So we've also in the process of launching our Inclusion for All framework, because, and this picks up on some of the conversation earlier, with 113 local authorities nationally either identified as safety valve or best value, we know that there is a national SEND crisis. And part of that was owing to the SEND reforms that were introduced in 2014 that did drive a kind of process-driven approach. which has upped nationally the numbers of requests for education, health and care plans. And the reason for that is because often the support, without an education, health and care plan, the support is not put in place. So that is driving obviously increased numbers of referrals for education, health and care plans. In terms of our Inclusion for All approach, what we're aiming to do is have a needs-led approach where we will look at supporting all of our schools and settings to be fully inclusive, so that needs are identified and met earlier and not necessarily dependent on that lengthy, protracted education, health and care plan process. Absolutely, those children that have them, we have a statutory requirement to ensure that their needs are being met. So as part of that Inclusion for All framework, there is a whole host of activity, starting with inclusive practice that goes back to that end-to-end review that I talked about, but also whilst dealing with the urgent and critical, we also want to make that cultural shift to having a much more inclusive support for all of our children, starting in early years. So we're on the journey of implementing that, but obviously cultural change takes time. We've got an inclusion summit scheduled for November the 18th that will include our health partners as well as our schools and settings to define what do we mean by inclusive practice in Cambridgeshire, and how are we going to ensure that we create that sense of belonging for all children and young people so that they feel welcome and celebrated and able to thrive within their schools and settings. So there's a whole lot of work, but I do accept that the current practice is not good enough. It's not good enough for those children and young people, and we do need to do more, and that's what we're doing through that Inclusion for All framework.
Thank you very much for both of you for your answers. If I may just interpret them in my own way. So first of all, on the special schools, thank you for pointing out these are special schools and not mainstream, and that significant change in numbers. So we're talking about 14 schools. Just a small drop in the number of schools accounts for quite a large change. So thank you for that. On the other two, I'd say there's basically two stories that I heard. One is that the targets, we may not be doing well against our performance targets, but the national trend is a different trend, and we may be performing well against that. The one thing I would say to that is at some point in time, officers, highly respected officers, drew up targets that we were close to or nearby, or that they were stretch targets, but they were believed to be possible. And now we're a long way from them, and we're looking for new targets instead of saying, why can't we achieve what was possible once, believed possible once upon a time? And that's a message to the committee, because you signed off on those targets as well. The second message, which I totally understand and agree with, is a story of a journey. Things haven't been going well. They're reflected in the figures, they're reflected in Ofsted, and you're taking action plans to deal with the things that haven't gone well. That's absolutely the correct approach, the right thing to do. And what I'm saying to the committee is the way that we will know if that journey is progressing to along the yellow brick road to success, shall we say, is when we start seeing some of those indicators change from that very worrying red into something else. That's one of the easiest ways for us to measure things and understand things, taking it away from what is actually a verbal explanation that we get that is quality rich, but not data rich. And I think it's important that we keep track of that. And I really look forward to those journeys translating into actualities, so we don't get so deep in there. So thank you very much for those responses.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton, please.
Thanks very much for the report. So indicator 130, we've looked at this before, and this is the reading, writing, maths combined to the expected standard. So last time it was below target, and this time it's even further below target. And if I look at the narrative towards the end of that section, I think you're putting in additional support. There's a teaching school hub. Can you just say a little more about that? I mean, it's quite a sort of disturbing, worrying trend, and I just wondered, we just wanted to know a little bit more about what you're doing.
Yep, thank you. So again, 57% for reading, writing, maths at the end of Key Stage 2 does demonstrate a decline, and it is obviously below national. What we know is that of those, the reading, writing, maths, writing is our biggest problem. And what we also have recognised is that we're seeing a lot of children starting school post-COVID with greater needs, but also who have not attended, not taken advantage of the childcare offer. So are arriving in school not school ready. So we're doing a lot of work in early years. 92% of our early years settings now have trained SENCOs working with them. And we also have 17 early years settings and a further 89 schools that have engaged in the trauma-informed practice, because we know post-COVID that some of those needs that were prevalent before the pandemic are now more exacerbated, and some of our most vulnerable children are struggling more. And this is playing out not just only in our attainment, but also in our attendance and also behavioural in terms of suspensions as well. So there's a lot of work that we're looking at in terms of who are our most impacted groups, who are then dragging down, for want of a better word, the overall performance. So we're seeing differences not just in need across the county, but also in geographical areas. And so what we're having to do in response to that is obviously target our resources in the places for those children who are struggling more, who need that support more, starting earlier on, but also again through that trauma-informed practice, supporting schools and settings to deal with needs that they perhaps not experienced before, because we are seeing that there is a higher level of children with SEN. They are overrepresented in poor attendance and poor attainment. But we need to ensure our schools are fully skilled and supported to be able to enable those children to thrive. So it's about interrogating the story beneath the data. We've also put in a bid with the Education Endowment Fund, which is an organisation that does support children that are disadvantaged. We got through the first part of that bidding process, and we're waiting to see if we get through the second part, which is when we will know whether we've got the money. So again, that will be a project that will be specifically targeted at those schools where we're seeing that performance playing out.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
My question's been asked and answered by others. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, in which case we've been asked to note this report, so no voting is required. Our final item on today's agenda is item 9, the committee agenda plan, training plan and committee appointments. Are there any changes to the published agenda plan, please?
It's just to note that the report on the Alconbury Weald School will actually move to the next committee meeting, so in November, and it's actually on the agenda for February on the current printed agenda, so it's moving forwards to November. Sorry, so the Alconbury Weald report that's on the agenda for February, it's moved now to November.
Any comments on the training plan, please? Nope. Which brings us to the end of today's business. We next meet on Tuesday, the 26th of November 2024, and I declare this meeting closed. Sorry, Councillor Count.
My apologies. I thought Councillor Sharp was bringing this up. The audit action plan is supposed to be coming to this committee. Is it on the agenda?
So in November, we have the safety valve report coming, and it comes under that. Yes.
So it's going to be an appendix to the going to be a published appendix to the safety valve report.
It will be part of the safety valve report. Yeah.
It'll be published. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.